You know what time it is. You've seen all the rest. We're here to rank Leprechaun from worst to best. Yay, no more bad rhymes. All right, everybody, the time has come. We have finished up the Leprechaun review series. For those that did not hear in the past two videos, I did review Leprechaun Returns when it first came out, so that video will be a part of the review playlist. But if you missed that one and did not see that review, I'll put a link up here. But I have reviewed all the Leprechaun films up to this point, and now it is time to end on the Leprechaun ranking. So this is going to be kind of a funny ranking because quite a few of these movies I really did not care for. I think I gave the most fuck this movies to this franchise than I have ever given yet. And yet somehow I'd probably rather revisit this series than to revisit Wrong Turn. So whatever that says about me, I don't know. But here we go. We have 8 movies, I believe. Yes, 8 movies in the Leprechaun franchise. We have basically 3 different incarnations of the Leprechaun in here. So I don't know. It might get a little bit wild. I never know how controversial my rankings are until I post them, and then I get all the angry fanboys down below. So we'll see if I agree with you guys this time. So coming in at number 8, the worst of this franchise for me, by a narrow margin, is Leprechaun Back to the Hood. This one just has the unfortunate nature of being the most boring of the bad Leprechaun movies. And I say bad Leprechaun as if most of these aren't bad, but there's 3 movies that I gave fuck this movie to that I really just did not like at all, that I will probably never rewatch. And of the 3, this one is the most boring, to where I watched it. All of the things that I hated about the bad Leprechaun movies are here, from terrible characters, not very inventive kills, to just no effort whatsoever put into this movie, even going as far as just kind of losing sight of what the best part of Leprechaun in the Hood was, which is these little touches of almost like spoofing that subgenre, and they just abandon that completely and go back to the tried and true formula of the Leprechaun hunting down his gold. And this is just the most ridiculously, mind-numbingly boring representation of that. And even the Leprechaun himself is a bit of a joke in this movie, and I don't like that. If you're gonna be doing a movie within a horror icons franchise, you never disrespect the horror icon. Halloween Resurrection did that mistake. Leprechaun Back to the Hood made that mistake, and it is number 8. Number 7, coming just above that one, is the most batshit wild entry in this franchise, and that's gonna be Leprechaun 4 in Space. This one I remember liking as a kid a little bit, but as an adult, it's just too much. I give it credit for just having a lot of wild ideas and going in a lot of wild different directions. I mean, you've got lightsabers, you've got alien princesses, you've got a dude getting turned into a spider. I mean, this movie goes for it. It's the most unique of any of the Leprechaun films, hands down. Unfortunately, it throws everything at the wall, and most of that slides off and just piles onto the floor, because every single idea in this movie, for the most part, just falls on its face for me. It's just way too weird, way too batshit, to the point where it's just too much. It doesn't really have any vibes of the Leprechaun franchise whatsoever. It almost feels like somebody wanted to make a really tacky B-movie space opera, and then they threw Leprechaun in there, and just the motivations aren't even really about gold. It's just about, I want to take this princess back so I can be the queen or the king, and that's easy to just write in the Leprechaun. So I don't know. I don't know the history of this movie. I would not be surprised whatsoever if it started off as something different. It's wild, it's crazy, but it's not very good. I mean, for fuck's sake, when the most memorable kill in your movie is the Leprechaun shooting out of a guy's piss hole, you got problems.
Be a lesson to you, lad. Always wear a prophylactic.
Number 6 is Leprechaun Origins. Now this one, I was curious walking into it because I had never seen it. This was one of 2 movies in this franchise that I had never seen for this review series. And when I watched it, I was immediately blown away at what this movie turned out to be. I'm expecting like a backstory with a new Leprechaun actor, because I knew Warwick Davis wasn't going to be in this, and they're probably going to tell some new origin that I'm going to hate. I figured that was what I was walking into. No, what I was walking into is like a monster flick. It's a Wendigo movie that they just decided to call Leprechaun. this is not a Leprechaun movie whatsoever. I applaud anybody that wants to reboot a franchise and go in a wildly new direction, but you gotta hold on to the core concept. You gotta keep the heart of what the fans love about the franchise, and this movie just disposed all of it. Just like Leprechaun 4 in space. I would not be surprised if this started off as just a regular old Wendigo B-level horror film and somebody said, hey, let's mention Leprechauns once, set it in Ireland, and slap the Leprechaun franchise name on it. That's about the only ties you have to the overall franchise in this movie. You get past that, and you just have a very mediocre to bad Wendigo movie, monster flick. You have characters you don't care about, that you barely know anything about. The monster is not filmed or used very effectively. It gets this little leprechaun vision thing that kills all the tension. The kills are decent enough, I guess, and it just goes nowhere. It's a movie that you cannot enjoy whether you're a Leprechaun fan or you're just a monster movie fan. It's just a bad flick. So number 6, Leprechaun Origins. Number 5 is going to be Leprechaun 2. Now, out of all the movies that I grew up watching, this was the one that I remembered the least about, and it became clear why whenever I watched it. There's not really a whole lot memorable about this movie. There's a pretty funny kill with some lawnmower blades where a guy thinks he's looking at a pair of titties and he's not. There's a good kill with a pot of gold showing up in a guy's stomach. I like the scene where they kind of trick the leprechaun into drinking, and I like the whole backstory concept about how he's trying to get a bride, giving it a little bit of a new flavor while still having that gold concept in there. So it's a decent enough watchable sequel, but it just doesn't really have a whole lot in it that merits its existence. You know, this is a movie series that, quite honestly, as much as I have some guilty pleasure charm with it, I kind of am surprised that it's gone on as long as it is, because even my number 1 is not the greatest movie in the world. Leprechaun 2, certainly not the greatest. Number 5. Number 4 is Leprechaun in the Hood. Now, this is where they start to embrace the comedy side of this a little bit more and abandon the horror just a bit. It's not even really a slasher flick. It's more like a black comedy, no pun intended, set in the hood, to where the leprechaun shows up every once in a while and kind of fucks up the works for the main characters. You got a rapper and his friends where they're trying to be this positive influence in rap. You got Ice-T, who stole all the gold, and he's kind of like a big producer in the hood that's saying, fuck all that shit, we got to talk about guns and drugs and hoes. And then Leprechaun comes in and is like, hey, where's my magic flute? That's basically the whole premise of this movie. And why it's just a little bit more entertaining than Leprechaun 2 for me is that there's a little bit more jokiness to it. I mean, Ice-T pulling an entire bat out of his afro is absolutely classic. I wish the movie really harnessed that side of things more. But it does have some fun with that classic Leprechaun Warwick Davis presence, being in the hood, smoking joints and everything like that. It's a goofy, fun time. Huge missed opportunity at the end of the day, but still a mildly entertaining black comedy.
I come from the land of the Irish Spring. Dublin's the place where I learned my thing. From the Emerald Isle to your place in the hood, I'm the man of green, come to do no good.
Number 3, Leprechaun Returns. Now, upon rewatch, I think the actor that replaced Warwick Davis annoyed me a little bit more than he did initially. When I first reviewed this movie and watched it, I had not seen the Leprechaun franchise in quite a while, so if I remember correctly, one of the big things that I was saying is, you know what? For not having Warwick Davis here, he actually does pretty good at doing a Warwick Davis impersonation, so I kind of tagged along with that pretty good. After binging the franchise, well, watching it throughout the last month, and then ending with this movie, his performance is okay, but it certainly stands out as one of the weaker points of the movie. His laugh, the hee thing that he does, that's not Leprechaun to me.
I've got a lot of killing to make up for.
This can't be real.
Do I look like a figment of imagination to you?
And they kind of muffle his voice a little bit too. Beyond all that, I like the fact that they go back to the original movie. They kind of Halloween 2018 it. They go back, you get Ozzy here in the first 15 minutes and as a ghost later on. I thought that was a really cool touch and a pretty gruesome way to tie the events of the first film back into his resurrection of this one. This has probably the most inventive kills, if not at least the best presented kills in the franchise, which again, not a high bar, but that is something. If you're a slasher fan like me and that's what you're watching these movies for, that is a plus. And for the fact of it being kind of this modern, you know, social message type movie talking about the environment and stuff like that, that's probably the most tolerable social commentary you can put in a horror movie without feeling like you're being beat over the head. it works decent enough. I think the characters are okay. The setting is still cool, having it back in this farmhouse, and having the Leprechaun back and being as close to Warwick Davis as possible without actually having Warwick Davis. I think it's a pretty decent little follow-up. Number 2 is Leprechaun 3, Leprechaun in Vegas. Now, this one, while being certainly like the most relishing in the B-movie, straight-to-video quality that most of these movies goes into, it actually has a lot more fun along the way. And I think a lot of people actually have this as their number 1, and I kind of understand why. This is a film that, again, kind of resets the stage. There's not a whole lot of continuity here. The Leprechaun is unleashed in Vegas, and it brings in this lore to where if you have one of his gold shillings, you get to be granted one wish. And so it kind of takes this fun little goofy concept about all of these really greedy ass vain people in Vegas doing these really selfish wishes, and after they get what they feel they want the most, Leprechaun comes in and fucks them up. Some pretty good kills here, some very memorable kills. I mean, he explodes a chick's tits and ass. He has a guy that's literally sawed in half, which is in competition for the goriest kill in this franchise. You have a guy that's being turned into a leprechaun for the back half of it. It's a fun little movie. Is it great? No. Is it one of the best ever? Hell no. But for this franchise, it goes for what this franchise does well in, which is B-level horror comedy. But coming in at number 1 for me is the original Leprechaun. This is the only one that I have ever revisited since my childhood, and I think there's a reason for that. This is the one that has the most charm for me. I mean, yeah, Jennifer Aniston here, that's cool. She's not the most memorable part of the movie, but the fact that it was the first one, that it introduced the lore, that it introduced this character, and I just like the flow of the movie. It's got a good little pace to it. For a B movie, I think it works pretty well. This is the only movie in this franchise, I believe, that I gave a go out and buy it to. Maybe I did that for the third one, I'm not exactly sure, but it's certainly the one that I enjoy the most. It's the only one out of this entire franchise that I would recommend to most horror fans, whereas all the rest of them I would have to ask you a couple questions about what your taste is. The movie still holds a good bit of nostalgia for me, reminds me of my childhood, reminds me of going to the video store and picking up these movies. When I'm in the mood for a movie like this, the first one pretty much always satisfies my cravings. So it is my number 1, my favorite of the Leprechaun franchise.
Fuck you, Lucky Charms.
Well, that's it, guys. What do you think? What are your favorites? What are your least favorites of the Leprechaun franchise? Go ahead and rank them down below. Thank you for following along with me on this franchise review series all March long. Next month, we're going to be doing a little bit different, not doing a review series, but I'm going to be reviewing some of my favorite films of all time leading up to the top 100 films of all time for me and Brian Lomax. That'll be at the end of April. And then in May, we're kicking back off with Saw and getting that thing wrapped up with Spiral. So thank you guys for watching. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. I've got rankings and review series out the ass for horror fans, as well as a lot of other genres out there. So check out everything I got to offer on this channel. You will enjoy it, I promise. Thank you for watching. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.